is going on? No horsing around, family. Zach Boyd, Stephen Burton, back at it again. Guys, the middle of the summer, not a lot to talk about, not a lot of storylines. We thought we were going to talk about top 5 all-time favorite Colts. Now, don't confuse this with the best 5 Colts of all time. These are our personal 5 favorites. So I just thought it'd be a unique touch. We definitely wanted to include you guys in on this. Want to see where you're at with the comments and all of that good stuff, and just see what your thoughts are. Who are your top 5 favorite? If we're missing somebody that should be on that list, we definitely want to know who you think. Also, before we get kicked off, Steven worked super, super, super hard. Kind of did a little bit of a facelift, a rebranding, getting ready for season 3. You'll see some changes with the graphics. You'll see some things different with the intro. We wanted to include, the Mount Rushmore of the Indianapolis Colts. And we got all 4 of them there. We got Johnny U, Peyton Manning, Andrew Luck, and now, of course, Drake Wally's guy, Anthony Richardson, AR5. Drake, thank you so much for stopping by. Drake, curious, your top 5 favorite all-time Colts, as we're going to be talking about this on the live stream here. Steven, take it away. What do you got?
Yeah, so, we were toying around because there's not a lot of information. There's not a lot. Everybody's on vacation right now, coaches, players. So there's not a lot going on. So we were like, let's just have a little bit of fun. Like I'll be sitting around my office, probably like everybody does, sitting around there, and you're like, man, you start talking about your favorite team, and you start talking like, who are your favorite players? Who are the most memorable ones you have?
Yeah,
and they don't ever line up with other people. So I called Zach up and I was like, man, let's just have a little bit of fun. Let's just name some of our favorite players. Drake has already named. Did he keep it to 5? 1, 2, 3, 4. I see 4. No, 5. Sorry.
Just off the dome, my boy firing him off the dome.
And we'll reveal Drake slowly. But
exactly, man.
That'll just be cool. Boom, right away, man. I think me and you will kind of go back and forth. Like, I'll name one, you name one.
Yeah. I'm going to start one. And guys, I want to preface this again. These are not – I'm going to let you take the floor here in a second, Steven. These are not the best 5 Colts of all time. These are just personally our favorite players, guys that we just really adapted to, really loved watching play the game of football, and love seeing those guys have the shoe on that helmet as Colts.
So if I'm kind of jumping it off, right, and I'm going with one of my favorites, I'm going to go – the last one I name will be like my favorite. We'll kind of go like that.
Okay.
For me, I'm gonna go Robert Mathis.
Okay.
Love the way he played. Love the intensity. And truthfully, as I've gotten older and become kind of that more seasoned fan, and he's obviously retired now, the investment he's made back into the organization, being around the organization, I love to see that. He's invested. He worked really hard back in the day with Kamoko Toure before he left. He was a pass rush specialist for a while. He was employed by the team. I love to see that. And he's from Alabama A&M, just a small school coming out of college. No one thought he was going to be anything, and he was amazing.
Yeah, man. Hard to not. He's on my list. Okay. So I don't want to kind of go back and forth and just compare and contrast. I'll put him on my list later, and I'll kind of give you the way I feel about him. But just to play off of that and just to have a different vibe as far as my top 5, one of the top 5 players, as an Indianapolis Colts. I'll leave my very favorite for the very end, and it's not probably who everyone's going to think it is when we come down to it, as far as that goes. But one of my all-time favorite Colts, man, I can't get enough of the playoffs, Steven. Kansas City, Larry Johnson leading the NFL in rushing yards, and Bob Sanders jumping literally like a primal lion and knocking that man went over to the sideline, put a towel over his head and said, nah, not anymore, man. And I'm not condoning injuries. I'm not condoning any, but that guy was just that he was that dude. He was that physical. Obviously won Defensive Player of the Year. Short-lived career, but one hell of a football player, and he's definitely one of my favorite 5. So he makes the list for me.
So I'm going to piggyback And we've gotten a lot of people are dropping their list in,
Yep.
and I love it. Drake's
Love it.
dropping in a lot of fun little ones too.
Yeah.
I'm going to piggyback on what you said. So truthfully, chips on the tip, he is my favorite player of all time.
Oh,
Bob
wow.
Sanders is actually my number one favorite Colts player of all time. And it's for everything you said, right? It's everything that you've said about him. And the only thing that I'll add is part of it too was the Colts had been deemed this soft, pass first, finesse team. And he came in and was just like a human scud missile every Sunday. Tore apart his body, obviously. And I think there's just something, and he changed the way that people looked at that defense.
Yeah.
When he was healthy, he was the game wrecker.
Yes.
And there's probably a little bit of lore too, because nobody talks, like he doesn't do any interviews. That's the dream for me. I'd love to talk to him.
Yeah.
But you don't see him do anything. No media, no nothing. He's just kind of, when he retired. But man, cat out of the bag, he is hands down. You can ask anybody around me. He is my favorite Colts player of all time.
Wow, man. I mean, and I'll be honest with you, hard not to love a guy who plays that way. So shout out to Bob Sanders being on that list. I guess he would be your we'll use him as your number 2, and then I'll go and I'll let you kind of go back. So my number 2, there's so many great Colts that we all love, so much as far as that goes. And 2 of them to me, were the first 2 I thought, and they were so obvious. But the other ones, it kind of got hard, honestly. It really did. You mentioned earlier Robert Mathis, and he is going to make my top 5 favorite Colts. One of the few players that wore the horseshoe his whole career, right? Like that's a hard thing to do, to say you play for one franchise your whole career, led the league, in sacks in a year. Everybody kind of felt like it was inevitable that we we're going to have this drop off when Dwight Freeney went elsewhere. Not so fast. I mean, Robert Mathis had a good 3 or 4 year run where he was just a game wrecker out there. And I'll never get tired of the hands out like that, man. I mean, after that strip sack the quarterback, I mean, that dude was a sack artist. Not only did he get the sack, he got the ball out of that quarterback's hands so much. And as a matter of fact, I don't know if anybody remembers this or not, his last defensive play as an Indianapolis Colts, he did have a sack. I thought that was really, really cool, man. I mean, it just gave me goosebumps watching him play. So for that reason, he is on my top 5. He's one of the second of on this list of 5 of my favorite Colts of all time. I'm going to go with Robert Mathis. Very similar to you, Steven. What say you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna. We've already talked about him. I mean, I love Robert Mathis. I think he's amazing. When you're picked where you are, that's a part of it too, right? Like that's the lore of it. When you're picked that late, nothing's expected of you. It's kind of like he's not going to be on my list, but it's kind of like I love Pierre Garçon.
Yeah,
you don't expect anything out of that guy, and he was a solid player for several years.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at number 3 now.
Yeah.
I've had Robert Mathis. I've had Bob Sanders. I mean, I'm going to go Marvin Harrison.
Okay.
Is up there for me. Marvin Harrison is definitely a top 5. It was just something about him. The joke in my house, living in Tennessee, like everybody knows I do, I went to a lot of games, and it's starving Marvin Harrison, man. Like and you just watch.
Yeah.
I was at the game when Peyton threw it from what was it, like the 5. He had that dive, one-handed, curling under in the cold. I was at that game. I saw that catch.
Yeah.
I mean, and he was just a legit playmaker.
So good.
I mean, and also I feel like he was one of the first people who he got down. Like he was not going to take a hit. And then that knee happened and it was just done. It was just done very quickly. But him as a player, top 5. I mean, amazing.
Yeah, he absolutely was unreal. I mean, you want to talk about a guy who you talk about, the modern era where all these wide receivers are kind of taught how to protect their bodies and avoid the hit. The famous Marvin Harrison catching the football and then kind of running inward and circling back around and getting more yards. I mean, he was really, really good. First playoff game I ever went to, Denver Broncos, Indianapolis Colts, Marvin Harrison catches the ball. Everybody is walking away from the play and everything. Not so fast. Marvin Harrison jumps up and runs that ball all the way in for a touchdown. And
nobody knows what happened.
hey, that was an ass whipping right there, brother. I mean, we beat the Denver Broncos very handily in that football game, and that was at the kind of the heyday of the Colts in the golden era, I like to call it anyways. Definitely a very, very good one. So I guess I'm on number 3 right now. Definitely going to go. Man, this is where it kind of gets hard because I didn't realize how many players that I really actually liked before we had this conversation. I was like, oh my gosh, dude, I got 20 players I could probably put on this list. But nevertheless, we can't do 20 because we're only doing the 5. And just for me personally, for what he brought to the game and what he did for, just that era, that golden era, we talk about it. And he doesn't get a lot of credit around the NFL. Probably will never get the credit that he deserves because he was on such a potent offense. But I love me some Dallas Clark, and I can't help it. I mean, that dude was unbelievable, and he is one of my 5 favorite Indianapolis Colts football players. Love Dallas Clark. I just love the way he played the game, and I love that he always ran these seam routes, Steven. Like, that's the hardest route for a tight end to run because you're going to get hit every single time. And Peyton would just lay that ball out there and, putting his body out there, exposing his hands, and just catching it and getting that first down, getting up, putting that ball through his legs and giving it to the referee after he gets that first down or that big catch. Love Dallas Clark. So for me, maybe not the most popular one on there, but as a Colts fan, I just loved his game. I love the way he played the game of football and was a very good Colt and just somebody very easy to root for in the Boyd household.
See, and I'm surprised you pick it. And let's also not forget, no gloves. Never wore gloves.
Yep.
Never wore a glove. Never really had a problem with drops either, which was insane. He was kind of, if you think about it with him, he was kind of on the leading edge of the super athletic tight ends coming out of like Iowa and out of the other college programs. He was kind of one of those first ones that the new age ones. Not we're not talking like Tony Gonzalez, but like he came in around that time when the tight end was really more.
Yeah, beginning of the hybrid era as tight ends go. Guys who could actually run real route concepts as tight ends. They weren't just inline blockers and then, hey, run 8 yards, turn around, and I'll throw you the football. He ran real routes. He had real design to what he was doing in that Tom Moore offense. So, yeah, definitely fun. Definitely fun to watch that for sure. Damn, man, I'm kind of regretting we didn't ask Drake to get on this live stream with us because it would have been fun to hear his takes on some of the players. So I've got 3. Are you 3 in?
I am. So let's see. I have Robert Mathis, and I have Bob Sanders. And I had Marvin Harrison. So okay. Yeah, I'm a 3. 4. I'm number 4.
You're down to 4.
So for me, this is where when you get down to your final 2, right? Like I feel like some of it's predictable, some of it might not be predictable. I feel like what I'm going to give this time might be slightly unpredictable. He is the reason that I'm a Colts fan. Wow. He's my favorite. He's one of my favorite players when I was young. Poster on my wall. It's Marshall Faulk. I know he wasn't a Colt for super long. He is the reason that I became a Colts fan. Fun fact sharing as a child of the 80s and early 90s, right? Like when you picked your team and that was your team.
Oh yeah.
You didn't follow the players. By God, when he got traded to the Rams, if I didn't struggle.
Yeah.
I didn't go.
As a kid, with my Colts. As a younger kid,
that's my guy.
Like, man, I really like this football player.
Oh, struggled mightily when he left for the Rams.
And just an unbelievable pass catcher out of the backfield. I mean, that guy had
it never really went to full, we didn't see the full range of it when he was with the Colts. But for me, I mean, he is the reason I was a Colts. He was the reason that I would tune into the games before I could watch every game. He was the reason I tuned in when they got the occasional primetime game. I mean, poster on the wall, martial law. I still remember it.
Yeah, man.
He is the reason I became a Colts fan.
Pretty cool. Pretty cool. Yeah. Love Marshall. Great running back. Great pass catcher. Turns out we got a pretty damn good running back in return for him when we traded in that year. Then we ended up drafting Edgerrin James, which was very,
Worked
very
out
close.
just fine.
Was very close to making it on my list as well because I love me some Edgerrin James.
I'm interested because there's a guy you've not named that
I'm
I
gonna
know
sa-
you utterly adore.
I'm gonna save him for last. So I'm gonna throw this one out there now. This guy here, obviously, has a statue when you go to Lucas Oil Stadium. It's clear and obvious. I don't think there's a person in the world that doesn't love Peyton Manning.
Yeah.
Obviously, he set the world on fire. He gave us so much hope. He brought the trophy back to this city. So many good memories with Peyton Manning. I mean, you expected to win, Steven. I think that was the crazy part. And I mean, so many great highlight games for Peyton. I think, obviously the Monday night game against Tampa, everybody thinks, oh, this game's over. And then all of a sudden we come back and we win that game with like 3.5 minutes left in the game. Drake mentions that, Falk would have had 1,500 rushing and 12 receiving. Yeah, you're probably not wrong on that, man. I mean, dude was
It'd have been interesting.
Bro, if fantasy football would have been what it is today, I mean, your boy would have been picked first every year, probably in his prime time, especially in St. Louis. But Peyton Manning, I mean, I know there's some people that's indifferent, with the Denver thing, the Colts thing. But for me, he's always going to be a Colt. Can't take that away from us as fans. We got to witness it. We got to see it. It was a great feeling. It was a great time. It was electric. And, I mean, as long as there was 1 second on the clock, we had a chance to win a football game with Peyton Manning on the football field. I mean, he was just that good. And he was elite, man. I mean, he was elite. I just think that Angie just said, I hope Falk plays this year. I don't think you're going to get that.
Yeah.
I don't think you're going to get that this year or really any year.
That was pretty good. Literally made Zach stop and do a double take. Do you go back, watch the video? You can see
one of my
Zach
favorites right there. That's yeah. That's yeah. Well, there you go.
Quote of the night.
Yeah, I'll say this though. I mean, the Indianapolis Colts, they wouldn't be what they are. They wouldn't have had the national recognition without Peyton Manning. And just like your shirt alludes, he's the GOAT. I think that for me, and this is selfish and this is ridiculous and this is outrageous to say, he's still the greatest quarterback that I think I've ever seen. I think he was in a different situation. Probably, I think if you reverse the situation, Tom Brady and Peyton Manning, I think similar results probably happen. That's all I'm saying when it comes to that. So yeah, he's my fourth on the list. Steven, what say you?
I mean, he's obviously he's my number one, right? Like, so we'll get that out of the way. Like, he's my number one. I'm going to piggyback on what you say. I get in arguments all the time. I do think I've said it. I think he's the greatest quarterback of all time. I think Peyton Manning is probably the greatest winner of all time when it comes to the accolades that he has. But let's never forget, like, Peyton Manning nowadays, it's a little more common. Peyton Manning went to the line with the entire playbook at his disposal.
Oh,
it wasn't like one audible or two audibles. He had the entire playbook. He changed the franchise completely. I don't think it would be overblown to say Indy may not even have the Colts if it wasn't for Peyton Manning. Let's not forget there was a lot of talk of them going to LA at that point.
Yeah.
They couldn't get a new stadium, and that's why Lucas Oil is the house that Peyton built. I mean, and then for me personally, I got to watch him play a ton. Not as much as season ticket holders or in Indy, but I got to watch him play a lot down here in Tennessee. And being a young kid in Tennessee who is a fan of the Colts who are playing the Titans all the time,
yeah,
it made it okay because whether people want to admit it or not, he's a Vol. more than anything else in the state of Tennessee. They
Yeah.
adore him. The first few years, the stadium in Tennessee was partially Titans, a lot of Colts, and a lot of UT Orange.
Yeah.
Like, and there were people who didn't cheer for the Colts, but didn't cheer against them because of Peyton. And like you said too, I mean, it wasn't that you walked in thinking you were going to win the game. Like, you kind of knew it. Like, you kind of knew there were games you were walking in, you're going to win the game. And you walked into seasons disappointed if we didn't win 10 games that season.
Yeah.
Like,
That
regularly
was,
10, 12, 14 games.
Benchmark. Yeah. I mean, 10, 12, 13, really 11 or 12 games was the bare minimum for him.
09, I said this, 2009, someone asked me a question on who is the greatest team that never won a title. 2009 Colts.
Yeah.
Sitting them, losing the last 2 games, still getting the Super Bowl, muff punt, all of that. That was one of the greatest teams ever. And the fact that we didn't get, another Super Bowl out of it is mind-blowing. And I know, like you said too, and this is the last thing I'll say, is I know a lot of people, there's always that argument with the Broncos. He's a Colts. He's a Colt. He knows it. I know people get upset because he lives in Denver. He said why he lives in Denver. He's got young kids. He's more settled up there. You correct me if I'm wrong, because you live in Indy. I believe the Peyton Manning Memorial Hospital is still there.
All through the state.
So
I mean,
he's still very much connected with the state.
Still connected. Yeah. I want to get to CCJT's prize comment. Did anybody forget about Johnny Unitas? If you'll check down on the bottom of that banner, you'll see that we definitely did not forget about Johnny Unitas, as he's one of the 4.
I didn't see him play.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. It'd be hard for me to put him on the list because I didn't get to see him with my own eyes. But definitely a legendary football player. And then last on the list for me is Reggie Wayne. I mean, I
knew it.
You talk about Bob Sanders, like I would talk about Reggie Wayne, my all-time favorite Colt. Everything that he embodied as a football player absolutely captivated me, and I love the wide receiver position. It's probably my favorite position, honestly, to scout because of Reggie Wayne, because he was so it was so technical. All the nuances. You want to talk about a guy who had great hands and really, really, really found a way to use his body and his eyes to manipulate those routes. When he wasn't always the fastest wide receiver, if you threw the ball to Reggie Wayne, post corner route, just catching it every single time, getting those 2 toes down on the sideline, and just a really, really special player. And for me, as a Colts fan, he's my all-time favorite Colt. Reggie Wayne will always be a special, special player for me, and that's why I made the list.
See, I was waiting. I was going to be upset, generally upset if he wasn't on your list, because I know he's your favorite player. I would have called you a liar if he wasn't on your list, because I know he is. I know, and saying all the things you said, he is. He was the next step, right? Like, you had Marvin, and Marvin handed the baton to Reggie, and Reggie was so good for so long. And it's such a travesty he's not in the Hall of Fame yet. I say yet because I think it's just a matter of time. I think the wide receiver's so log jammed that it's going to take him a few years. But he was so good for so long. And then he handed it to TY, and now he's back teaching the young guys in the room and being the wide receivers coach. And I frankly was surprised that he's back this year, because I thought a lot of it was to do with Reich, and now it kind of sounds more like he likes the room. He likes coaching. I love Reggie, man. I mean, Reggie was just, and he was a different kind of receiver than Marvin Harrison. That was the thing. Like, he was, and he had, I'm going to say it, and it's going to sound funny. He kind of had like this swag to him that Marvin did not. And really, truthfully, I can't, like, TY kind of had this like quiet confidence, more like Marvin. I don't think we've had a receiver with just like, who carried themselves in the way that Reggie did, where he was so cool.
He's pretty amazing football player, and I'm happy to have him on that coaching staff, being in there on the sidelines. It's pretty cool to see him come back and represent the Horseshoe even longer in his career. So definitely special. We love seeing all of you guys put all of these comments up there as well. Colton put up there, he absolutely hates the fact that Philip Dorsett, Anthony Gonzalez, Donald Brown, Bjorn Werner were all first-round picks. Yeah, I probably, I guess, 80% agree with you. Probably don't hate the Donald Brown pick, although he definitely wasn't a first rounder. I thought they got some good games out of him over his career. Solid. Anthony Gonzalez, his career ended because of injuries. Solid, not great, but yeah, you're right. I mean,
Dorsett, horrible pick.
Yeah.
Bjorn Warner looks worse in hindsight because of the fact of who they passed up and how much of a flameout he was. Now, I can see why they picked him, but you look over these ones. I agree. Anthony Gonzalez, I think he suffered similar fate to Austin Collie. Just a lot of concussions, just couldn't really play. Couldn't play anymore. Body wasn't built really for the NFL in that kind of perspective. Donald Brown annoyed the crap out of me. I always wanted him to be good. You always try to talk yourself into it. I think Donald Brown is most famous for the clip, right?
Yeah.
For the clip of Peyton yelling at him for missing the block.
Yeah. I mean, we had some rough picks. There's no doubt about that. Most of us like Colton all time, Mike Vanderjagt. Same. Yeah. I mean,
but can we acknowledge one thing with Vanderjagt? Until that moment, he was an amazing kicker, right? And then he just took that foot and promptly lodged it in his mouth against the face of the NFL and Peyton Manning. And that was kind of it. Like you want that swag like we were talking about with Reggie, but you don't really want it with your kicker. He had a lot of that, and he thought he was bigger than he was. And
yeah, that was a terrible
said the wrong thing, man.
To be a Colts fan, it was just a terrible moment. I mean, my 9-year-old son probably could have kicked a field goal, better than that. I mean, it was a pretty terrible result. And yeah, I mean, he's basically a piece of bleep, when it comes down to it. He wasn't a very good person, I don't think, but extremely accurate. I think at one time, honestly, I think he was the most accurate field goal kicker in NFL history at one time. It kind of went down and dwindled. I think he had a little stint with the Cowboys there for a second, but he had a good little run, but he ended real sour with us for sure. Who else, man? Who else would you put on the list? I mean, I know we've kind of went through it, but like some other, let's just kind of kick it down the road and just some other favorite players that we've had. Let's go through a couple more here before we hop off. Just some guys that you really enjoyed playing over the years. Who you got?
I mean, and I can hear it in my head too. I hear it with some of the people. You feel it with the people who will watch this and the people who are in the chat. We don't have a lot of current players, right? And I think me and you are both older. I think that gets lost sometimes.
Yeah.
On people is that I grew up watching a whole different team, and there's just a personal connection with a lot of these players that is different than the newer players. Not to say I love T.Y. Hilton. I love Andrew Luck.
We haven't had a chance to enjoy the success at that level, at that rate. So I think it becomes much harder, to gravitate and say all-time favorite, even though you still really like those players. All-time favorite, man. I mean, that's pretty high up on the list. I mean, as far as that goes, I do love T.Y. I think some players that really go underrated, I'll say this much, like a Tarek Glenn. I mean, he was a damn good left tackle. I mean, you weren't getting past Tarek Glenn. I mean, it was that simple. Yeah. I mean, he just did not allow sacks. He was very, very good. But then again,
dare we say a name that shouldn't have been mentioned for what it's going to be stained for a little bit because of what happened. But Jeff Saturday was amazing. He's just an amazing player.
He was a hell of a center as well. I mean, you could pick so many players kind of from that era. We didn't really put Edgerrin on there, but Edgerrin was amazing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
I got one that He's remembered for a lot of things. Marlon Jackson's a huge one for me,
Sure.
just because of the
Because of what
iconic
he did.
play that was made.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
It lives forever.
Yeah, that was, I mean, watching that replay, you never get tired of listening to that. Bob Lamey calling that interception as they get ready to go, do what they got to do. Really good.
And the tough thing with the newer players is when we're talking Reggie Wayne, Marvin Harrison, Bob Sanders. These guys are guys who were drafted by the Colts, and I know Reggie had a cup of coffee, really, truthfully, with the Patriots right there at the very end. Never really played, but these are guys who all you remember is Colts. And there's a lot of players now that, in the last 10 years that I really like, but they come in and they go sometimes. You don't see those players stay. Another one that we didn't even mention, still hadn't mentioned, that was a hell of a lot of fun to watch was Dwight Freeney.
Yeah.
Fun to watch, and at the same time, frustrating because he'd get up so quick and they'd run right through the middle.
Yeah.
And you're like, man, but he'd get up so quick.
Great sack artist, too. I mean, he could be on that list very easily. Another guy, if you want to go back to this a little bit further, that really kind of was the beginning of the era where we were starting to get a little bit more successful as a football franchise. Captain Comeback was fun to watch, man. I mean, if you had a chance to watch him play, especially that year, that we almost made the Super Bowl. Yeah, I mean, I've told this story before on here. People probably don't believe me, but Cordell Stewart clearly stepped out of bounds in that football game. I don't know if you watched that, but I was at a bar one night in Louisville, Kentucky, and I look up and Cordell Stewart's there. And what do? Like any crazy, ridiculous Colts fan who probably had a little too much to drink that night, I walk up to Cordell Stewart and tell him, hey, man, you were out of bounds. And, hey, I said it for all of us, man. We all need to let him know.
What did he say to you?
I think he thought
there were a few
this
choice
is the
words.
most ridiculous thing that's happened to me in a very long time. And I'm just gonna let things slide. He really didn't give me much. He didn't really give me much. But I just want to let him know.
You stepped out of bounds, bro.
I know that you stepped out of bounds and we should have went to the Super Bowl. I just want you to know that. And I want you to also know you're the reason the instant replay came back the very next year. And it hasn't went away since. I mean, it was a very bad call. I mean, clearly if you go back and watch it, I mean, he
Colton.
Dude, I
he needed to know.
He had to know, man. I mean, yeah, I agree.
He knew.
I agree. No, he already knew. He needed to be told by an actual Colts fan. I'm pretty sure I had a Colts hat on that night too, and I just walked right over to him. Really, guys, if you're watching this, don't walk up to a professional football player and tell them that they stepped out of bounds, especially if it's about 1:00 in the morning and you're in a town that's not yours. Definitely don't do that. But yeah, I mean, I did it, and can't say that I'm not proud of it. I actually am very proud of it. I'm happy I did it. I'm also happy.
It's a great story now.
I'm also happy he didn't knock my teeth out. So, I mean, I had a lot of good things happen that night for me.
A lot of positive things.
A lot of positive things happened that night.
I'd love to say like I've had an encounter like that, but totally not. I mean, I've had plenty of encounters with Titans fans, throughout the years. I like Colton's question. I wanted to pop it up because I liked it. Favorite player that wasn't drafted by the Colts. I'm assuming he's saying just any player that we've watched over time who was drafted by another team.
So if it's a non-Colt player, this is so freaking easy for me to answer because I'm a middle school, high school, just out of my mind sports fanatic. And if you all got a chance to watch Barry Sanders run the football,
that's a good one.
Dude, he was so fun to watch. I would literally turn on to watch the crappy Lions play every single week if the Colts weren't playing. just to see Barry Sanders, make something out of literally nothing. The ball starts 5 yards in the backfield. He goes left, he goes right. Next thing you know, he springs it for 40 yards. I mean, just an incredible running back. Hate the fact that he had to end his career short. Just had a really weird life, with football and his dad, and a lot of things factored into that. But a special talent, and my gosh, I mean, he was one of the players that didn't play for the Colts that I always really enjoyed watching play.
I mean, I'll show my age. Same thing, that middle school, that high school, living in the South, obviously, living in Tennessee, living in the South. Michael Vick was probably one of my favorite players to watch.
Yeah.
And if anybody's on this live stream, you're lying to yourself if you didn't play Madden with him and run 50 yards backwards to run 100 yards forward because he outran everybody.
Yeah.
Michael Vick was such a phenomenon to watch. And then being from a family that is Florida State boosters, they played them in the national title game, watching him in college.
Yeah.
And seeing how it transitioned, and then seeing him in Atlanta. And I mean, I think I've told everyone living in really, really southern Tennessee, close to Georgia for college, I watched a ton of Falcon games with him. I mean, it's something. He changed the way the game completely was played by the quarterback. It was the first time that I know people will say like Randall Cunningham and, you'll go back to those guys, but he's the first time that someone came in and could do that. And it was okay that they did that. And it was cool that they did that. It was such a perfect mesh of who he played for, how he played. And even, you go forward, him as a person, I think, you go what happened, it's horrible. And then you go to the Eagles, and how he played with the Eagles was a whole different kind of quarterback, watching him run around and throw. And I think people forget, because he was so fast, that dude, man, he had like Josh Allen type arm. Yeah, he had a huge arm. I think people forget that. I mean, it's just he was such a fun guy to watch because it was just so different than anybody you'd ever seen. I think everyone knows the clip I always think of is the one where he split the two defenders in overtime and they ran into each other. It was like a cartoon.
Yeah. Colton said Dan Marino, Ray Finkel's teammate.
Dan Marino's a good one too.
Give a big shout out to Nomad hopping on here while his Orioles are killing those pinstripes. 14-0. That's a beautiful thing to hear. I'll be honest with you while we're here on this live stream. A lot of people have Adam Vinatieri. Oh, so I kind of I think the question was maybe player who ended up playing for the Colts, but we didn't necessarily.
Okay.
Which is cool too.
That's a fun. Yeah. Let's figure that out. Let's see.
Favorite Colt
player that they like. So they acquired.
First of all,
draft.
Vinatieri is a really good one. Whoever threw
Vinatieri, strong one.
Genius. Let's see. I mean, most of their talent, they really.
That's a really good one.
Most of the talent they've never really brought on. I don't know if they've
big time. Last time they brought big time free agents was Ryan Grigson, bringing in like LaRon Landry. Now, who it may have been Drake earlier mentioning DeQuil Jackson. I think that's forgot about a lot. Really strong player.
Yeah, really good tackler. You can count on him for getting over 100 tackles every year.
I got one.
Okay.
Vontae Davis.
Oh, you're right, brother.
That was such a big trade when it happened.
Before he got hurt,
he was so good for several years. He was the guy.
Yeah, that's probably that one's going to be hard to top as far as what we brought in or what we acquired. I mean,
and you combine it too with, you could say like Danico Autry. That was a great pickup, but it was very low expectation. Vontae was a big trade.
Yeah,
like it was a ballsy trade. He came in, and dude was amazing, and he was young when he came in. It wasn't like picking up an older piece.
Yeah, in his prime.
I mean, I would put him up there. I mean, he could go. Truthfully, if you're ranking top 15 player, top 20 players, he's probably in anyway.
He's up
as a top 20 player for the Colts all time.
He's up there, man. I mean, he's definitely up there. All time, one of the probably one of the better trades that we made, and probably the only guy I know who literally retired at halftime in the middle of a football game. I mean, he literally just walked in there and just pieced out on his whole football team, which is a strange thing to do. But that being said, I mean, I think this has been fun, Steven. I mean, we had a good opportunity to kind of talk about some old history, kind of get nostalgic a little bit, talk about some trades, talk about just different things as we're getting ready and ramped up to get into this season. One thing I would ask you guys to do, if you haven't already, like, rate, review, share, and subscribe. Join the No Horsing Around family. And if you already have, thank you so much for being a part of this. Steve and I can just never say it enough how thankful we are for having you be a part of this little family that we've created that's growing and it's getting bigger. And as it gets bigger, we're going to try to do more. We're going to try to give you better content. So always do like you do. Light us up in the comments. Let us know what you want to talk about as we get ready for training camp. Steven, I'll let you take it from here and end it off.
Yeah, as we get closer to training camp, there's going to be more topics. There's going to be more fun. But also, I'm going to drop this here at the end. Make sure you check out our buddies over at Wager Wire, because you're coming up on being able to do what we do most years at this point, is bet on the Colts to win the division, right? Like, you just kind of do that. Or bet on them. You're going to get great odds right now to win for the winning of the Super Bowl. Bet $10. You may make, a couple, who knows, 1,000 off.
That Anthony Richardson. Go to Wager Wire. Anthony Richardson, Offensive Rookie of the Year.
I mean, that's a solid bet. He's not. I'll tell you this. I've looked recently, and he is not. It is not great odds. You are going to get really good odds if you go over there and you make that bet. Another fun one would be just a dark horse. Be Joshua Downs, and see him potentially be an Offensive Rookie of the Year. So that's a little dark horse there. But go check them out. Go over wagerwire.com. Drop in your email address. I have talked with them recently. We had talked about having some people on from there this summer. We're still working on that, so they can explain a little bit. And I did ask. I have asked. I know a lot of people are asking, when is that app coming? It's still a little bit pending. I've reached out to a couple people over there trying to give you guys better detail on it. But go check them out. Follow them on Twitter at Wager Wire, and then go check out the Twitter Spaces that they do by fans for fans. But I agree. And we've done this whole big revamp. Me and Zach have been really excited. Hopefully you enjoyed the brand new intro video and the new graphics. Go check out. There's a new header on Twitter. There's a new header on Facebook and a new header on YouTube and new thumbnails and everything that we do, because we're ramping towards this season.
Yeah, man.
And so we're excited. And, at the same time, we're not going to lose what we get most excited about, which is talking to you guys. Because we love talking to you guys. And like Zach said, if you've not yet hit that subscribe, join that family. It's not just subscribing to a channel, it's joining a family, because we do these, and we do these throughout the season too, to where you guys get your voice. Whether it's good or you disagree with us, which we have plenty of people who do, or you're even a fan of a different team, you're always welcome on this channel. So in the end, I know that I love you. I know Zach loves you. We'll talk to you guys next time. We're out.